We're learning Hilchos Lulav Perek Zayin Halacha Zayin. Kama noitel man. How many of each species do you take? Lulav echad, one lulav. Let's go down and see what the Peirush tells us over here. One lulav, esrig echad, and one esrig, shnei badi arova, and two myrtle twigs, two willow twigs, shloisha badi hodas, and three hodas. The Maggid Mishnah cites the Mishnah. Mishur loima shloisha, three hadasim, and two arovas. Lulav echad, esrig echad. And by hadasim, even two, if that have the top has dried out, the echad shading to kotam, as long as the third one is okay. Perek Chas Halacha Hey, he explains what niktam is, that the head is chopped off. Avtavin says even if all three are chopped off, just like a lulav one and esrig one, also one hodas and one arova. The Gemara Shmuel Halacha is like Avtavin, and all the Goinim passing like Rabbi Shmuel, you need three hadasim. Okay, Avtavin says you need that even if all three have their top chopped off. But the Rambam passing like Rabbi Kiva, that you answer with one hadas. The Halacha like Rabbi Kiva when he's only disagreeing with one person, like Avtavin. Not when he's disagreeing with many. And here he only disagrees on Rabbi Shmuel, who needs three, and therefore the Halacha is Rabbi Kiva. Even though Avtavin also mentions three, he's just disagreeing about the question of the heads have to be whole or not. Rabbi Shmuel needs one to be whole. Avtavin says they can all be without heads, but he didn't mention anything as to how many you really need. Like he was talking only regarding the number. It's enough one, and not having to do with ketimo. Allah is very Avtavin, the ketimo. Allah is very Avtavin when it comes to being chopped off, because the Allah was made like him. You have that. It's okay with three chopped off, and Allah is Rabbi Kiva. You need only one. Both of them are lahakol. That it's enough one that is chopped off, but you didn't keep a mitzvah correctly in the best fashion. All the Goinim are like the Rambam. The Goaz Ma'amin says Rabbi Yehuda, it says the name of Shmuel, the Halacha like Avtavin, so passing Toisvis, like the Rambam, you need three hadasim. Not like it seems from Rashi, Halacha like Rabbi Kiva, that you take one from each. What's the reasoning of Rabbi Shmuel? That lulav echad esrig echad, two arovas and three hadasim. So Rabbi Manoach brings down because the pasuk says pre eitz hada, which seems to be referring to one. Kapos Timorim also seems to be referring to one. It says kapas, actually is written, even though we read it kapos, which would be two. Anaf eitz ovois is three. It doesn't say eitz ovois or anaf ovois, but it says anaf eitz ovois. That's three branches. V'havei nochal, and the plural of willows is two. The Rambam continues. If you want to add to the myrtle twigs, you can add as much myrtles as you want because it's beautiful. It beautifies the lulav. But others you do not add. You don't take more than one lulav or an esrig or two arovas. Nor do you minimize less than two arovas. If you added or made less, it's possible. The Kesef Mishnah says loy posel, because there is the opinion that one is enough. The Rebbe disagrees. Avram says I never found that there should be posel like isur toisvis, nor adding or taking off. Even though Yehuda who says that you have to bind with the lulav the other minim, I never heard that there's any distinction. The Rambam says in Sukkah 36b, my time with Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda? Because he says you do not tie the lulav only with the same type of palm branch. with which would make Kesheklach, and he's Ksova, Lulav Tzorach Egan. He's of the opinion that Lulav needs to be bound. The Elgid Boy, Mino Achina Havale Moisef, and if he adds to it a fifth species, it is added Miklal the Miklal the Chikot Alei, that if he ties it besiv with the bark and the inner bark of the date tree, which is called siv, or bikor the diklo, or that which goes around the date tree, like a moisev, he's not adding halagav the ikotvei. He has more milulav echad, more than one lulav alone. That if from that min he takes some more, there's no bal teisah. And certainly according to Chachamim the Omri, who say ein tzorach eged, that you don't have to bind it. We consider it as if he took 4 minim alone, and the sieve, which ties them together, is taken separately. But if you hold, there's no obligation to tie it, even though you tied it, it's not part of the bundle. The Mishnah explains, if you want to add by Hodesh, you can do as much as you want. That there's no forbiddenness by Odosim because it makes it beautiful. Even though Lulav does not need to be bound, for beauty, it's more correct to do so. And if you add Hadassah, it's also more beautiful. And he brings the words of the Rae Gann, and he says that he only is bringing a proof that if it's a different species, then you're over on Baal Tosef, but not in something which is already one of the 4 species, such as Hodos, the myrtle twig. The Magen Mishnah brings from Erevin that if you put on 2 tefillin on your head, you're Baal Tosef. What's the difference between this and 2 lulavim? And he pushes off the proof of the Rae Gann from Siv and Ikud Diklo, which he says that since it's already there, it's not extra. Because if you take it alone, you wouldn't be oitza. You need a lulav like also. It is a branch of the tree, of the date palm, before it opens up, as we said earlier, like a scepter. Therefore, when you tie it together, you're not oiva Baal Tosef, because you didn't take 2 lulavim. And since they're a type of lulav, they're not considered like a 5th species. But if you did take 2 lulavim, that would be Baal Tosef. And it's only if you took them like tefillin that you put them on his head at the same time. If you took a lulav with a different species, according to us, that lulav does not have to be tied together. He's not even Baal Tosef because they're each separately held. Meaning, even though they're in his hands, but to begin with, one should not add, like in Sukkah. And he proves that this is the das of the Rambam. In Halacha, he says, you don't add to it. He doesn't say if he added to it. Because if he added from a different species, you would not transgress. Only to begin with, one should not add. Here he writes in Hoyse, if he added or may had less, it's posel, when he means from that same species, another lulav, another esrog. Not like the case of Mishnah who has the text loy posel, it's not posel. Magen Mishnah adds that if you're doing it for the beauty, it doesn't matter whether it's its own species or another one, you can do it, whatever you want. And he wants to say you can add many myrtle twigs, but it doesn't matter if they're threesomes or they don't have 3 in a row. Like in Halacha Beis, you mentioned that you have to have 3 in a row for it to be kosher, otherwise it would be called a Hodesh Shoita. But since he's doing it to make it beautiful, you can add even from something which is a Hodesh Shoita. Besides one going that permitted to add another arava, just like a Hades. And the Rambam says in the Tshuva, we found the Gemara, it had to only be Hodes, and therefore one should not add a different add to a different species. The Magen Mishnah concludes, we see that there are disagreements about this. The Kesef Mishnah argues he doesn't know where it's mentioned in the Gemara that you can add myrtle twigs. That the Rambam learned it that you can add it, and Rabbi Menorach cites that he edited the words of the Rambam if he wants to add in Hodus V'Arova, then even by Arova you may do so. But Machon Nesher says, according to the Rambam, you shouldn't add more than 2 Arovas, because he wrote in the Tshuva, the Rambam himself wrote, by Arova, by the willow, you should not add on the 2. Just like you shouldn't add on the Lulav, which is 1. And it's more correct not to add. But when it came to the myrtle twig, one may add because of the Yeshana. It's a no mitzvah. Machon Nesher states, if he adds Arovas, he did not cause it to be a posel, because it doesn't say in the posel that it has to be only 2. It says a plural, not less than 2. But if it's more than 2, it would not be posel. Just that he did not fulfill the mitzvah to its completeness. Only Hadassim, it's a mitzvah to begin with to make it more beautiful, and therefore by Arova, it's a mitzvah to have only 2. Hilchos Sukkah and Lulav says the rule of beauty, they did not make it eating against. Therefore the Rambam writes, if you want to add Hadassim and Arova, you can add, and it's a no mitzvah. But you don't add another species on the number, because that's not beauty. Hilchos cites Rae Gann Family, who was asked if you can add to the 2 Arovas, and he answers, I was already asked about this a different time, and I used to say that it's forbidden like the Rambam, and afterwards a person pointed out to me that the Chachmei Provincia, the wise men of Provincia, questioned the Rambam, and he answered them that he changed his mind at the end of his life. He said, you may do so. That would seem to be logical. Arve is many, plural, and the plural minimum is 2. But you can't learn from that, you can't have more, because it could be even 100, as we say in Makis. How do I know even 100 witnesses? It says Adam witnesses. It doesn't say how many. Even though the minimum is 2, I can mean 100. And furthermore, we learn in Sukkah 31b, that even if he added to their species and he tied them together, it's not possible, because Lulav does not have to be tied. Everything is separate, and therefore it's separate. But also Lulav and Esrig is 1, you can't add, but if you add it, it doesn't possible. So everything is standing by itself, and therefore it's kosher. To begin with, one can add. As we see, there's 2 texts in the Rambam. According to the Chachmei Provincia, in his old age, he changed his mind, and the Arova he also permitted to add, because there is a beautification to the mitzvah. The Gesed Mishnah cites that Rambam was questioned by the Rambam forbade to add Arovas, more than 2, and he even made a posel if you add, and he answered that they should correct their texts. The Rambam changed his mind, and they fixed the svarim that he had, and you have to have the text read, and if you add it or minimize, it's not possible, not that it is possible. And that's a great proof. The Gesed Mishnah cites that the Rosh writes in Perek Gimel, the Rambam wrote, if he wants to add Bahodas, sure it should be a large bunch, because that makes a beauty of the mitzvah, it's fine. But other species one should not add. If he added or minimized, it's possible. And the exact opposite would seem to be true, that Hodas one should not be able to add to, because it says 3 words on Afet Zovois. That's how we learn 3. And by Arovas it says Arve, which is a minimum of 2, but could mean very many more. And therefore it should be more correct to add Arovas than Hadassim. The Chachmei Provincia asked regarding this, and the Rambam changed his mind and he permitted it. Thus, the correct text is that if you add Arovas or Hadassim, it does not passel. Hilchos Sukkah cites Tosfos. Even if you put many Hadassim together, there's no Baal Tosef, only if he adds another type. It's a species. The Kabbas Tamorim is in the opinion that if he took 2 Lulavim or Esrogim, there's no Baal Tosef either, only if he takes from a different species. When what Tosfos mentions only Hadassim and Arovas, that you shouldn't think that only by Arova, where it says Arva, you can add. By Hadassim, you should only take 3, because it says Anafetz Ovois. That's why the Rambam says that you can use more. And they had to say Arovos, because there's a place that's saying how that you can add because of beauty. And Arovos not because of beauty, therefore that even if he added Arovos, you're not over Baal Tosef. Because Maimonides concludes all of Ashkenaz, the minig is to take arova, like the equivalent of Lulav, which is Begematria, in the numerical equivalent is 30 and 30, 60, and 68. With the three ties that we tied with, the Lulav is 71. Like the Sanhedrin HaGodol, like the great Sanhedrin, which sat in the Hilchos Sukkah that were 70, otherwise they were 23, and the Nasi of the Sanhedrin was above them, so you have 71. The Rambam writes if you added or minimized, it does not become possible. That it doesn't mean that you had less than 3 hadassim or 2 arobas, because that's obligatory, as we learned from the Pasuk, but it means if he added a lot, or if he didn't add, that's what it means. And because 3 arobas and 2 hadassim, rather, 3 hadassim and 2 arobas are the minimum. Shulchan Aruch in 651, as the halacha, you shouldn't add another one on the 4 because of Baal Tosef. The Mishnah Berurah cites in the Beis Yosef that even when he doesn't have intent to do so, he would be over Baal Tosef. And the halacha cites that so the Aliyah Rabbah points out from the Rosh. But the thought of the Torah is that you're not over until you have intent for a Shem Mitzvah. Shulchan Aruch continues, a person should not take more than 1 lulav and esrog, but by Arova Vahodas, he can add as much as he wants, like the Rambam after he recanted. And there are those who forbid you to add myrtle twigs, which are not kosher to be myrtles. They don't have 3 in a row on every row. And there are those who permit it because it's only for beauty. But those who are careful don't add on the 2 arovas and the 3 hadassim. The Mishnah Berurah, if Cotton Samach says that it's correct that you should have in mind that he's tying them together not for the mitzvah but rather for beauty. And the Biur Halacha explains that those that are careful take only 2 arobas to fulfill the Rambam's original thought, but the hadassim, even to begin with, you can permit it to take more because of the beauty. And maybe according to Kabbalah there's an idea here as well, and there are those congregations that add many hadassim for beauty.